All right, West Virginia fans, it's here. It's the Backyard Brawl week, and it's something that we've been counting down all off season since Rich Rodriguez was announced. Really, since we blew the game last year, I think a lot of fans were looking forward to this game. It's something that we always count down to, and it's a game that you always want to win. I know if you're a Mountaineer fan, you very heavily despise Pitt. You do not like them, and they do not like us. And it's one of the more gritty rivalries in the country. And it is going to be an entertaining game on Saturday. But so what we're going to do on this video is we're going to break down what Pitt has to offer and who are their talented players. We're going to break down the game in general, and we're going to talk about a few keys to the game that West Virginia needs to do if they have any chance of pulling off the upset on Saturday. Before we get started, if you're a West Virginia fan, please remember to like and subscribe to JerseyEER. We've been growing at a good rate. We're closing in on 400 subscribers, so we definitely want to get there soon. So if you enjoy previews like this or post-game reactions or just Mountaineer talk in general, definitely like and subscribe to the show. With that being said, let's break down this game for Saturday. So the tail of the tape, the matchup that we've been waiting for. It's the 108th time that these teams are playing against each other. When the teams left the Big East, there was a little bit of a hiatus, about a decade. So they just started playing it a few years ago again. It's going to be a 3:30 kickoff on ESPN. So nationally televised games should have a lot of eyeballs for this one. You know, rivalry games do attract a lot of people. It would have probably been a lot more attractive if West Virginia didn't lose last week. You know, we kind of had a disappointing loss there. So there's a lot of talk of game day coming. So they're not. So now it's just about the ball game. It's not about the TV show. It's just about this matchup coming up. It's a Stripe the Stadium game, which always looks good on TV. It always looks good at the stadium. The last time that Pitt came in was a Stripe the Stadium game. So that's going to be cool to see in the stadium. All-time series, Pitt leads 41-63-3. You know, a lot of those wins came a long time ago, and they had some big winning streaks. If you really look at the series over the last few times they've played, it's been pretty even, kind of a back and forth deal. So it's a really good rivalry with two really similar brands of football. And then the next game is not until 2029. So this one's going to be important for both fan bases. They're going to want to grab this one, right? Because it's going to give you bragging rights for the next 4 years until they meet again. So it looks like these teams have no plans of meeting up. Never say never, but based on the future schedules, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So that's kind of the preview and the basics for Saturday. Let's look at the team's seasons to this point. Let's start with Pittsburgh. 2 wins, right? They beat Duquesne 61-9, and then they beat Central Michigan 45-17. So they haven't played any Power 4 opponents yet or anything like that. Pitt last year, if you remember, went on a 7-game losing streak to end the season. Eli Holstein was banged up in a lot of those games, so that might have been part of it, but it definitely wasn't a good look for Pitt to lose that many games in a row. But now they're feeling confident going into this one. It seems like they got their swagger back. Now I get it. They haven't played anyone tough yet, but they did what they had to do in those games. West Virginia, they beat Robert Morris 45-3, but in the first half, they had a ton of fumbling issues and a lot of things to clean up. And then obviously last week we lost 17-10, which we just looked not very good on offense. We couldn't sustain blocks, and it was super concerning. So a big measuring stick for both these teams because it's the first time they're going to see a Power 4 opponent, and it's right on the eve of them going into their conferences. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this one, and it could tell you what's going to happen for expectations for these teams moving forward. So that is the teams this season. Let's start about the restart of the series and some of the recent stuff. This one really pains me, and it pained me to make this one. So they restarted this back in 2022. West Virginia, as we all remember, had a very good chance at winning that game late. Neil Brown got super conservative and didn't go for it on 4th and short on Pitt's end. The ball went through Bryce Ford Wheaton's hands for a pick 6. And that memory will always stick with me. It was one of the worst West Virginia losses I've ever seen. It was one of the more ones I was most upset about because it felt like we should have had that win. And then the year after, we take care of business 17-6. Pitt was not good that year. They had really bad quarterback play with Phil Jerkovich. Garrett Green actually got hurt early in that game, and Nico Markle came in. West Virginia didn't run too many crazy stuff that game. They kind of relied on that defense, and they didn't really have to do too much to beat Pitt that day. A great crowd, one of Neil Brown's better wins because he did beat a rival. And then last year's game was really, really hard to look back on because it's another one that we had in our hands, right? I mean, we blew like in a 10 or 11-point lead late in that game. I think we had a win probability of like 98% with 3 minutes to go, and we just could not stop Pitt from going down the field and scoring on us. So I don't want to play the coulda, woulda, shoulda game because ultimately we're 1-2. But man, if you look at some of the opportunities that we had, we could have easily been up in the series 3-0. And it kind of stinks because, not going to rule out this week's game at all. I think it's going to be a good game, but this is probably the toughest matchup we're going to have with Pitt in these 4 games. I think in all of the other games, we matched up pretty decently with Pitt. So the fact that we only got one of them, especially the way those games ended, definitely stings. So it just makes trying to pull one out on Saturday more important because I know as a West Virginia fan, I do not want to go 1-3 in this restart and then have a pause in the series because we're never going to hear the end of it. So those were very missed opportunities since the restart of the series, but we had to at least highlight that for the show. Hot ticket, right? I mean, this game, if you're trying to get it on the secondary market right now, good luck. You're going to pay a pretty penny. You look at the cheapest ticket to even get in the door at like $300. That is a very, very expensive ticket, and then plus fees. You probably been better off getting like a 304 package or buying a season ticket at that point. Very similar to the Penn State ticket sale prices last year, right? So if you're going to the game, drop a comment if you bought them on StubHub or Vivid Seats or wherever you bought them, and let me know how much you spent on your ticket. I think that'd be interesting to see how much you guys are willing to pay to get in on Saturday. Hopefully the Mountaineers make it worth your while. Let's talk about Rich Rodriguez and his history in the series. So in 2001, from 2007, he went 4-3. Everyone's going to remember the one that happened in 2007 because West Virginia was 1 game away from the national championship. And we know the score 13-9. Pat White got hurt. We were like 28.5-point favorites and did not get the job done. And ultimately he left. And I don't need to remind you guys of that, but everyone's going to bring that one up. But in the series, when he coached the last 10 years, he did have a winning record of 4-3. And then Pat Narduzzi, not going to go over his record against West Virginia, but he's been the coach at Pitt since 2015. Has kind of had an up and down tenure, truthfully. I mean, you see a lot of 8 and 5s in there, but then sometimes dips down to 5 and 7. Comes back with an 11-3 season, but then goes to 3 and 9. So it's been like a roller coaster ride for Pat Narduzzi, including last year, right? Like I said, they won their first 7 games in a row, and then they lost their last 6. So it's been a roller coaster ride for him. I think he has some pressure on him this season to level up the program because I do think they have a good team, and they're going to want to see more consistent play moving forward. So be on the lookout for his team this season because some people think they're a dark horse in the ACC. So they're not going to want to see another 6-game losing streak. They're going to want to see more consistent wins and battling for the top of the ACC. Let's get into some of their players, right? We're going to break down the roster and kind of tell you what some of these guys do. Let's start with our quarterback. Eli Holstein came in as an Alabama transfer. Last year against West Virginia was probably played his best game of the season, right? Had 301 yards, 21 for 30 passing, and 3 touchdowns. He also ran the ball for 59 yards. So he was the main reason why they won that game. And he's a gritty player. He's a good leader. Last year, what stuck out to me is the game before us, they were in a similar situation with Cincinnati, and they found a way to pull out that game. And then last year, his team didn't panic, and he willed them to a win over West Virginia. So you have to respect this guy because he is a good quarterback. Rich Rodriguez said in his press conference that he thinks he's an NFL player. So you definitely have to respect his game. Just looking at his career stats, 25 touchdowns to 9 picks. This year, he's off to a decent start with 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. The thing is, though, he hasn't played a defense like West Virginia's this year yet. So we don't know what he's going to look like going into that game. I know he's a veteran and things like that, but it's going to be the first road start of the year, and he's going to be facing a Zach Alley defense that's going to throw the kitchen sink at him. So they're going to have to make him uncomfortable if West Virginia has any shot at winning the game. Desmond Reed, a really talented player. There's a big debate amongst Twitter and X fans of both teams of who's better, Desmond Reed and Jaheim White. And unfortunately, Jaheim White's not going to play in this game. He's a dual threat type of guy. He rushed for 966 yards last year at Pitt. And he has 112 this season. He's a guy that came over from Western Carolina and leveled up. He's also a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. 52 receptions last year for 579 yards and 4 touchdowns. What Pitt likes to do with their running backs is they like to take the running backs and put them in a slot and also use them as a wide receiver. So it's almost like they're a running back / wide receiver position. Last year against West Virginia, they did a really good job of bottling him up in the run game. 11 carries for 26 yards last year, but where he killed us was the passing game. 4 receptions for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns versus West Virginia last year. So that's where he can really kill you, is when he is getting the ball out of the backfield or in that slot and they throw him the ball, because he is a dynamic playmaker. He also returns punts, and they're not afraid to use his athleticism there. So look at him in the return game. He's a very dangerous player for Pitt, and you definitely have to keep your eye on him whenever he's on the field. Let's talk about the receiver room. Some decent players here. You have Hicks, Raphael Williams, and Kenny Johnson Jr. Hicks is a guy that came over from Louisville last year. He's off to a decent start this season, right? 5 catches for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging almost 15 yards a catch. So he's definitely had a nice change of scenery and is off to a good start there. Raphael Williams is a nice player too. 7 catches for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's played a decent amount of football for Pitt. And then Kenny Johnson Jr., 5 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown. Last year, Kenny Johnson was their leading receiver versus us with 79 yards. So he did it last year against us. Last year's secondary was not very good, but he does have experience in this rivalry, and this is a nice receiving room for Pitt. The tight end, Jake Overman, who's listed as a starter, he actually did not play last week versus Central Michigan, so keep an eye on that. Not sure what his status is going into the game. Can catch the ball, right? 17 catches last year for 160 yards and a touchdown. So averages about 1 to 2 catches a game. So not going to be a game breaker, but you definitely have to kind of watch him. And he's an Oregon State transfer. So he transferred over from Oregon State, I believe a few years ago, has played for Pitt a few times, has a lot of experience, and that's what they kind of have in their tight end room. Offensive line, a lot of different pieces here. Jeff Percy, a guy that has played at 41 career games at Michigan and made 3 starts in his time there. He transfers over from Michigan this year. And then the other guys you see, Keith Govia made 24 starts at Richmond, so has played a lot of snaps, but not at this level. So keep an eye out on that. Then you have Landon Cooper, started 12 career games at Pitt in his career and started his career at NC State. BJ Williams started 13 games last season for Pitt, and then Ryan Baer started 13 games last season. So, that one side of the line has played a lot of football for Pitt, so they're going to feel confident in that area. West Virginia's defensive line, though, I think can hold their own against these guys. It's not like they're, an amazing offensive line, but they definitely have a lot of experience. But if West Virginia wants to make some noise in this game, the defensive line is going to have to push these guys and cause some havoc there on Saturday to give ourselves a chance. So definitely watch the trenches. I'm going to watch the offensive line of Pitt versus West Virginia's defensive line and who wins that battle. Defensive line for Pitt, they have a few guys. Blaine Spires, guy that transferred over from Utah State and Bowling Green. They have Francis Brew, 4 tackles this year. Sean Fitzsimmons has 41 career tackles and 2.5 career sacks. And they have Jimmy Scott. Jimmy Scott's the one I have circled in this group. I think the other guys are fine, but I think it really starts with Jimmy Scott on this line. 30 tackles last year, 12.5 tackles for loss and 6 sacks and 2 pass breakups and a forced fumble. So nice stats for there. Anytime you can get 6 sacks in that position is a nice player. So Jimmy Scott is a guy that you're going to have to pay attention to on that offensive line. Where Pitt is really good is this room right here, the linebacker room. Probably the best probably the best room on their team. It's one of the best linebacker rooms in the entire country. They do a lot of different things really well. Rashid Biles, Kyle Lewis, and Braylon Lovelace. Get to know those names because they are really, really talented players. Kyle Lewis is a guy that is a New Jersey guy, actually. He's from East Orange, New Jersey. Had a really great game against West Virginia last year with 13 tackles and 5 solos versus West Virginia last year. He's going to be a guy that definitely plays on Sundays for them. And like I said, you can look at their stats here. They've been really productive room, and they are going to be a challenging bunch, right? If you watched Pitt versus Central Michigan last week, these guys caused havoc, and Central Michigan only had like 47 total yards in the first half. So you combine that with how bad West Virginia looked on offense versus Ohio. This is going to be a really tough matchup for the West Virginia Mountaineers. Not necessarily their defensive line, but what their linebackers bring and how athletic they are. They fly all over the field. They're a really talented group, and that is going to be one of the bigger mismatches that is in Pitt's advantage, if we're being honest, is that linebacker room. And then off to their secondary. They have a couple good guys here. Lynham, Brookins, McIntyre, and Battle. Keep an eye on Battle. He did not play last week versus Central Michigan. He's a guy that's been a little banged up in his career, so not sure what his status is for the game Saturday. But again, a room that has experience. You look at Brookins. He had a big play last year, had an interception versus West Virginia. Made 35 tackles last year and had 2 last year, and he's a young player. He still has a big future ahead of him. McIntyre, 11-game starter last year at safety for those guys, 2 career interceptions and 166 tackles. So, our guys have experience in the secondary too, but it's just not at this level. It's at other levels of football, a group of 5, and not really too much power 4. So if you compare those secondary to ours, I think they're comparable players, but they've just shown it a little bit more on this level in the power 4. Let's talk about the keys to the game. All right. And I think these keys are super important. Some of them are kind of obvious, but some of them just need to be stated because if we want to pull off this upstate, it could be a tall order, these things on this list are going to have to happen, or most of them are going to have to happen. I think the most important one is number 1 on that list is get the crowd going early. I was at that Penn State West Virginia game last year, and the crowd there did their part. We showed up. We were ready. We were there early. It was an amazing atmosphere. The problem, though, was the play on the field never got the crowd into that game. We were there. I think the only time we got excited in that game is when Penn State fumbled on like their first or second possession, and on the next play, West Virginia fumbled on a jet sweep, and we just never led in that game. And we just never got the crowd into that game. It was like you waited to go to that game and spend all this money, and then we never got to cheer about anything. That cannot happen on Saturday, especially after what happened against Ohio. I think that West Virginia fans are going to show up for this game because they have it circled on their calendar and they want to beat Pitt, but I think there's a lot of fan base that's leery about the team after what they saw. And if we go down early, it's not gonna build well for us. We cannot be predictable where we have to pass all the time on these guys. And if we get down early, I think the team's confidence is gonna be shaky. The fans' confidence is gonna be shaky, and it's just not gonna be the environment that it has to be. So, an early start and getting the crowd involved is going to be a major, major factor in this game, especially because it's Pitt's first road game and they're coming into a hostile environment. So you have to keep that going. Number 2, make Eli Holstein uncomfortable. Last year's defensive line actually did a nice job versus Pitt's offensive line for most of that game. TJ Jackson and those guys were having sacks and they did a really good job. But as the game wore on, they weren't able to get the same pressure, and Eli Holstein had too much time, and he had a career game versus us. You have to send multiple packages his way. You have to get him uncomfortable because he is a talented player. He's a guy that will scramble around and get to the line of scrimmage, and at the last second before he runs, throw it. And he has some dynamic wide receivers. So you cannot let him sit in the pocket, and you cannot let him scramble all day on you, or it's going to be a long day. So we need to get after this guy and make him as uncomfortable as possible on the road. The third thing, and I think this is actually the second biggest thing, is stay ahead of schedule on offense. I think that was one of the biggest problems of the Ohio game, is that we were constantly in like third and long situations because we could not run the ball. We had a very tough time getting first downs, and we were constantly in third and long situations. And that's why we had so many 3-and-outs. And that's why our time of possession was so bad in that game. We need to have good plays on first and second down. We need to make it, if it's going to be third down, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, throw different options at them and sustain blocks. It's not going to be an easy task because of how talented Pitt's linebackers are and how they fly around. But if you have any chance of winning this game, you cannot do the same things you did last week and be behind schedule in third and long situations, or it is going to be a long day to be a Mountaineer. The fourth thing that is a key to this game: don't give up big plays on special teams. As I mentioned earlier in the show, guys like Desmond Reed, they're not afraid to use them in the return game. They've had some big returns this year for touchdowns. They've had big returns for huge plays. If you remember last year, I believe there was like a block punt that changed that game. It just seems like when the backyard brawl happens, there's a major play on special teams for either team. A few years ago, I believe CJ Donaldson in his first game blocked a punt that was massive for West Virginia. So if we want a couple things, right? If we want to win, we cannot give up big plays on special teams. And number two, us ourselves might have to make some plays on special teams, right? If you are having a struggling offense, the way to combat that is plays on special teams and big plays on defense. So we might need some of those plays for this game for us to pull out this win, because there are some mismatches in favor of Pitt. Number 5, and this is one's pretty simple, and this is for the whole year. The offensive line needs to step up. If the offensive line looks as poorly as they did on Saturday, I don't see where we get another win this season. Right? I know Rich Rodriguez said in his show this week that from a scheme standpoint, they look good, but they didn't get enough push. Well, they need to get more push, especially starting this week, right? Because it's going to be a team that's going to be aggressive, and they're going to be a team that is going to bring their corners down and play man coverage and take away any of the easy stuff. And it is going to be a tall task. But if you want to win this game, your offensive line needs to play a lot better than they did on Saturday, or we have no chance at winning this game. And then the last thing is turnovers, right? And we won the turnover battle last week. And, Eli Holstein, even against poor competition this year, has thrown 2 picks. So he has thrown picks before in his career. We got 3 last week, and we won the turnover battle. And you can't say after watching that game that it was a defense fault that we lost that game. Now, I know there were some missed tackles and untimely penalties, but in the second half, that unit stepped up, and they're going to have to step up again. And they might have to win that turnover battle for us to have a shot, especially with how poorly the offense played and kind of where I think our confidence is offensively. The defense is going to have to make things happen against Pitt to give us a chance. I know it's a lot of things, but if we can make 4 to 5 of these things happen at home, it will give us a chance to come out with a victory on Saturday. And overall final thoughts on this rivalry, right? And just the game and where we are at as a program. It has been a very challenging week to be a West Virginia fan. It almost feels like this game has lost its mojo a little bit because we lost that game. And it just feels like the program is at a standstill, and we don't know what to think about this team. And it's one thing if we lose to Ohio and we have a veteran group and it's like, all right, that was a fluke. But when you have this many new players, you don't know what you're getting. So we need a sign of hope. We need a glimmer of confidence, and it starts Saturday, right? If this team can battle through this game and find a win, I think it would be a highlight and a high point of the season, no matter what happens the rest of the season, if you take care of this one, right? Because it's a long hiatus. But in order to do that, we need to lay out those things I said. We need the crowd to get involved. We need a few things to happen our way. But in these games, like I said before, you throw out the records, you throw out the past history, and it's a 60-minute game and anything can happen. And that's why they play these games, and we've seen crazy things in rivalries happen before. With that being said, I'm JerseyEER. Again, please remember to like and subscribe to the show. Let me know your score predictions in the chat. Let me know if you're going on Saturday, how much you paid for a ticket, or anything else you want to add to the show. I'd definitely love to hear from you guys, interact with you guys. It's been fun. With that being said, have a great rest of your day. Let's go Mountaineers. Let's go get them Saturday.